Harvey Lambert, thin and weathered, entered Old Pines Café with a quiet nod and a limp. No one said hello. Emily, the young waitress, with a half-tucked apron and a notepad, too clean for this early in the day, glanced up just in time to see him cross the threshold. She had seen him last Sunday, too. Same entrance, same table, same silence. The door closed gently behind him, letting in a brief draft that smelled of wet leaves and pine. It was Veterans Day morning in Kingsburg, Oregon, and the cafe was already filling up, the window panes fogged with the contrast between the warm interior and the crisp November air. Outside Old Pines Cafe had its traditions. On this day each year, veterans got breakfast at half price, and the regulars made a little extra room for folks who wore ball caps embroidered with ships and squadrons. But Harvey wore no hat, just a brown corduroy jacket buttoned high, a pair of charcoal gray slacks that had lost their crease long ago, and sturdy black shoes dulled by weather and years. He walked with care, cane in one hand, leather billfold in the other, and found his way to table 9, the one tucked beside the window, but still close enough to the coffee station to be noticed. Conversations dimmed slightly as he passed, not by intention, but by instinct. A few older men gave quick glances, noting the frayed cuffs, the limp, the absence of any visible patch or insignia. One muttered, "Looks like he just walked in from the junkyard." The others chuckled in that low way meant to be overheard, but not addressed. Emily hesitated behind the counter. She had only been working here a month, but she knew that today meant being polite, being quick, and not causing waves. Still, something about Harvey unsettled the regular rhythm of the room. She approached with her notepad ready, offered a soft smile. "Morning, sir. Veteran special today is eggs toast, coffee black." He nodded once. "Yes, ma'am. Thank you." No mention of discount, no correction, just quiet gratitude. She returned with the tray a few minutes later. By then, Harvey had already pulled a neatly folded napkin from his pocket and laid it out beside the knife and fork. He paid in cash, exact change, placing the bills deliberately and adding a single dollar beside them. Emily lingered a second longer than she needed to. His hands were steady, careful. He took his coffee with 2 small sips before touching the food. At the far end of the counter, a well-dressed woman with pearls and a permanent frown leaned toward the assistant manager. Her voice was polite but tight. "It's just, I don't mean to be rude, but some of us are trying to enjoy breakfast with our grandchildren. Maybe he'd be more comfortable outside." The suggestion made its way to Emily through a relay of glances and shrugs. The assistant manager nudged her with a sigh. "Just ask him gently." Emily approached again, this time feeling the weight of something she didn't understand pressing against her ribs. "Sir, I'm sorry, but a few guests asked if you might prefer the patio. It's quieter out there." Harvey looked up at her for the first time. "Not angry? Just tired," he nodded. "No trouble, miss." He rose slowly, lifting the tray with one hand, steadying himself with the cane in the other. The cafe wasn't large, but the space between table 9 and the side door stretched endlessly, as every eye watched his passage without saying a word. Mr. Clyde, seated by the far window, caught sight of Harvey through the glass and gave a small, respectful nod. Harvey didn't seem to notice. The patio was empty. A few wrought iron tables with mismatched chairs sat in the chilly air, surrounded by faded planters and an American flag barely fluttering in the breeze. Harvey chose the table nearest the edge, the one with the view of the alley and the sloped roofs beyond. He lowered himself with a creak, both from the metal chair and from his knees, and set the tray down. From the inner pocket of his jacket, he removed a plastic sleeve. Inside was a photograph yellowed with age. He slipped it out, placed it carefully beneath his glass of water to keep it from curling in the wind. 2 young men in uniform smiled back at him from decades ago. Back inside, a little boy tugged on his father's jacket and pointed out the window. "Why does that man walk funny?" His father leaned down, whispered, "Don't stare. He's just some old guy." Emily returned to the counter, but her gaze kept drifting to the patio. Harvey hadn't touched his eggs. He was just sitting there, eyes on the photo. She wasn't sure why her throat felt tight. She looked again, and for a brief second, the sunlight broke through the clouds and lit the old man's wrist as he reached for his coffee. There, barely visible beneath the fraying cuff of his jacket, was a faded tattoo, a crest pierced by a dagger. Kyle Travers stepped into the cafe expecting coffee. What he found made his chest tighten. The familiar bell above the door chimed as he entered, releasing a brief swirl of cold air into the warmth. The scent of hash browns, cinnamon rolls, and strong black coffee hit him like memory. His boots made soft thuds against the worn wooden floor. This place hadn't changed much since high school. Only now the menu had a laminated section for senior specials and a "Thank You Veterans" sign taped to the pie fridge. He gave a short nod to a few people who looked vaguely familiar, faces he couldn't name but might have played Little League with his older brother. At the counter, a young woman with strawberry blonde hair and a too-clean apron gave him a curious look. "Morning," he said, voice low and clear, "just coffee and bacon." Emily blinked, straightened. "Sure. Any toast with that?" He shook his head, then turned slightly toward the window. Something had caught his eye outside. At first he thought it was the sunlight glaring off a glass, but it wasn't. It was a tattoo barely visible just above the cuff of a brown corduroy sleeve. Simple, clean, a crest pierced by a dagger. His heart stuttered. "Everything okay?" Emily asked, her pen hovering mid-air. Kyle didn't answer. He took one step closer to the window, then another. The man sitting out there was older, gray, thin, hunched slightly, as he held a cup of coffee with both hands. A photo was pressed beneath a glass of water. No hat, no medals, no one sitting with him. Back at Bud's training, one of the instructors had spoken of Lambert G17. Not with fanfare, but with quiet awe. "You'll never meet him," they were told. "But if you do know this, his map's got 17 of our boys out alive. Seals walk because he crawled." The name was passed in whispers like a campfire myth. Kyle had memorized the tattoo. Described during that briefing, he knew it instantly. "Is it okay if I step out there?" Kyle asked, already moving before Emily could reply. She followed his gaze but didn't understand. He pushed open the patio door with a soft creak. The wind hit sharper out here. A bird landed on the metal railing and took off again. Kyle walked slowly, his heart beating fast now. Not from nerves, but from reverence, the kind you feel in places like Arlington. The old man didn't look up. Kyle stopped 2 feet from the table, swallowed once. "Excuse me, sir. Is that a wave crest and dagger?" Harvey turned, his eyes were steady, the color of old pewter. He looked at Kyle for a long moment, like searching a face through mist. "It is," he said. Voice even, Kyle inhaled. "Are you Lambert, 17? Harvey blinked slowly. "Long time ago," he murmured. "But yes, I was Kyle's." Back straightened without effort. His right hand rose to his brow, in a salute that came from every fiber of muscle memory, and deeper, sir. Harvey's hands stilled around the coffee cup. The wind caught the corner of the photograph beneath his glass and lifted it slightly before it fell flat again. His lips parted, but no sound came. Inside, Emily had just stepped behind the espresso machine with a tray of fresh mugs. When she caught the movement outside, she turned toward the patio. What she saw made her stop mid-step. The cafe falls silent. Forks stop mid-air. Even the coffee machine pauses in its hiss. Emily watches frozen, the tray trembling in her hands. The cafe didn't breathe. Even the regulars who'd ignored Harvey before now watched in stunned silence. From inside, the world had stilled, mugs hung halfway between counter and lip. Knives hovered above plates of hash. A grandmother who had been laughing moments ago now pressed her hand gently to her chest. The hum of conversation had vanished, not from command but from recognition. On the patio, Kyle lowered his salute slowly, reverently. His eyes stayed locked on the older man sitting before him. Harvey didn't return the gesture. He simply nodded once, a weight behind the movement that held the gravity of memory. The door behind them creaked as Emily stepped out, holding a steaming mug on a small plate. Her eyes darted between them, Kyle tall and solemn like a monument, and Harvey small in his chair, but now surrounded by something intangible. Authority, respect, history. "I brought you a fresh one," Emily said softly, setting the coffee down beside his tray. She hesitated, unsure if it was right to speak more, then added, "On the house." Harvey gave her a nod, barely audible. "Thank you, miss." Inside, Kyle turned to face the café. His voice, when it came, was quiet but carried to every corner. "This man before you," he said, "is the reason 17 of our brothers came home alive. No one moved." He mapped the swift current evac route, through mountains, hostile zones, radio blackouts. He kept the team alive with nothing but memory grit and a hand-drawn map. Someone near the back let out a low breath like a prayer. A small elderly man in a faded VFW jacket stood first. His palms clapped together once loud in the silence. Another followed, then another. Until the room was full of quiet applause, not thunderous, not demanded, just honest. Harvey sat through it all, eyes low, hands folded in his lap. Emily watched as something shifted inside her. The tattoo, the photo, the quiet tray of eggs. It all fit now. She rushed inside, fumbling in her purse under the counter, past lip balm and loose receipts. At the bottom, folded neatly between 2 napkins, was an envelope, yellowed. Her grandmother had given it to her years ago, just in case, she'd said. "You'll know when." Emily returned to the patio, the envelope trembling in her hand. I think this is for you," she whispered. Harvey looked at her, uncertain. She handed it to him. He unfolded the letter slowly, carefully. The paper crackled, his eyes moved across the handwriting. "Your friend always." He read aloud the words, thick in his throat. "James Voss." His voice caught. The name pulled him back in time. Campfires, jokes whispered in the dark, one last laugh before a mission that changed everything. He murmured, "Was my closest friend." Emily nodded. "He was my grandfather." Time stopped again. The photo beneath Harvey's glass now made sense. 2 men, young, proud, unaware of what would be lost. One returned, one didn't. Emily sat down slowly across from him. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Harvey's fingers shook slightly as he refolded the letter, holding it like something sacred. Mr. Clyde approached from the doorway, voice steady despite the emotion behind it. "We've been waiting a long time for you to come back, Harvey. Will you speak at our school assembly next week?" Harvey sat under the oak behind the café. Sleeves rolled just enough to reveal the crest, no longer ignored. The tree had been there longer than the café itself, with thick limbs arched over the narrow brick path and roots that curled like old fingers beneath the earth. Afternoon sun warmed the last golden leaves still clinging to the branches, while others danced along the ground in slow spirals. A gentle breeze brought with it the scent of cinnamon and roasted coffee drifting from the kitchen vent. Emily arrived carrying a small woven tray, a thermos of warm cider, 2 paper cups and thick slices of pumpkin loaf wrapped in napkins. She placed it gently on the iron table beside Harvey and sat down without speaking. She didn't want to disturb whatever silence he had chosen today. "You didn't have to bring all this," Harvey said after a moment. His voice steady, not cold. "It's not from me," Emily replied, smiling. "It's from Patty in the kitchen. She said she remembered you used to fix her dad's truck for free." Harvey gave a soft grunt, neither denying nor confirming. He poured cider into the 2 cups and passed one to her. The warmth seeped into her fingers as she took it. Kyle joined them a few minutes later, a small leather-bound notebook tucked under his arm. He nodded to both, took the empty chair across from Harvey, and said, "I brought copies of some old mission debriefs I found in the SEAL archives. You're in two of them, just as L-17. But it's there." Harvey said nothing at first. Then, with surprising care, he reached into his jacket pocket and produced a yellowed envelope folded at the corners. He slid it across the table inside a hand-drawn map. Lines traced with a practiced hand terrain, notations, elevation shifts, river paths, and a tiny mark labeled Swift Current, Exfil. The paper was fragile, but the ink remained dark and deliberate. "That was Laos," Harvey said, tapping a spot near the center. "We were down 4 men, radio was scrambled. My compass had cracked, so we had to navigate by stars and slope." Emily leaned forward, her breath caught. "The others were injured. James was point man. He'd lost a lot of blood. We had to keep moving slow but steady. Took us 12 hours to cover 7 miles. Kyle scribbled notes quickly, nodding along. "Back then," Harvey continued, "you didn't talk about extraction plans in public. Hell, we didn't even tell our own replacements. It was all muscle memory and gut instinct." His eyes didn't glisten, but something shifted in them, like a window opening to air too long. "Shut, I still see the cliffs when I close my eyes. And I still hear James say it just before the last radio cut out. 'Make it home, then buy me pie.'" Emily looked down at her cider, her hands tightening around the cup. "I never did," Harvey added. "That's why I came back here." Kyle gently slid his notebook aside. "You did come home, and you kept every one of us who came after walking safer." Harvey pulled another item from his envelope, a photo. 8 young men, sleeves rolled, sunburned arms, bright eyes, some holding mess kits, others leaning on each other like brothers, too proud to say it. He set it down on the table between them. "Only I came back walking. Barely." There was no silence this time, only understanding. Emily wiped at her eye and smiled. "My grandmother's coming to the school event next week," she said. "James would want her to be there." Harvey looked at her, then down at the picture again. "I don't like speeches," he said. Kyle's voice was soft, unhurried. "The world needs to know the names of the quiet ones, sir. You ready to tell them?" The gymnasium was full, rows of chairs, 4th graders with handmade flags. But everyone watched one man. It was the kind of Veterans Week morning. Kingsburg did well, cloudy but bright, crisp enough for scarves and warm enough that no one needed gloves. Inside the school gym, the buzz of chatter rose and fell in polite waves. The folding chairs creaked as families settled, coats draped over backs. Children clutching programs printed with Navy stars and the words, "Remembering the Quiet Ones." At the front of the room, beside the podium, sat a photo frame. Inside 8 young men, sleeves rolled squinting into the sun, of a long-ago jungle. Just beside it, taped neatly to the easel, was a hand-drawn map, edges wrinkled, lines faded but legible. Underneath a simple caption, "Swift Current Extraction, Laos, 1971." Mr. Clyde, standing off to the side with a clipboard tucked under one arm, surveyed the room with a quiet pride. He had taught some of these students' parents, and fought beside some of their grandparents. Today felt different, deeper. Kyle Travers stepped up to the microphone. His voice didn't need amplification to carry. "This town is lucky," he began, standing straight in his dress blues. "We're about to hear a story not found in books." He turned slightly, nodding toward the man seated behind him. Harvey Lambert stood slowly, no fanfare, no music, just the soft hush that falls when a room is ready to listen. He walked to the microphone, without notes, without pages or props. Just his hands folded in front of him, and eyes that had seen more than he ever wanted to recount. "My name is Harvey Lambert," he said. I served with SEAL Team G17. We were stationed deep in contested terrain during the Vietnam conflict. Some of the men in that photo," he nodded toward the frame, "never came home." He paused. "I'm not here to tell you war stories. I'm not here to talk about medals. I never earned one worth mentioning. What I did earn were handshakes, trust. A friend who asked me to make it home and to buy him pie when I did." A few students in the front row leaned forward, wide-eyed. Emily, sitting beside her grandmother, held her breath. The older woman reached out, squeezed her hand. "That's exactly how James wrote it. In his letters," she whispered. Harvey's voice didn't tremble, but something beneath it quivered like a string plucked gently. "Most people think heroes are loud, they charge ahead. But there were men on our team who worked in shadows, who fixed radios, drew maps, carried wounded one step at a time. Some of them never made it to the spotlight, but they mattered." He took a breath. "We don't all wear medals, but some carry ink that never fades." No one clapped. Not at first, just silence, respectful, heavy, filled with the weight of names unspoken. Then Mr. Clyde stepped forward, motioning to someone off stage. The mayor emerged, a round man with a serious tie and a folded proclamation in his hand. "Mr. Lambert," the mayor said, turning slightly so his voice reached the back. "On behalf of Kingsburg, we dedicate the alley behind Old Pines Café as Quiet Honor Lane." A curtain near the back of the gym was drawn aside, revealing a plaque on an easel bronze. Clean it bore the tattoo, the crest and dagger, and the words, "Not every hero raises his voice." Applause swelled. Not a standing ovation at first, but a ripple that grew chair by chair until the entire room stood, even the kids. Some removed their hats, others pressed palms to hearts. Harvey simply lowered his head in thanks. After the ceremony, Emily found him seated again at the folding chair by the podium. Hands resting on his knees, she approached quietly and placed a small plate beside him. One slice of pecan pie fork, tucked underneath. "For James," she whispered. Spring came with soft rain, blooming dogwoods, and an empty chair at table 9. The old oak behind Old Pines Café had budded early this year, its branches trembling in the breeze as if remembering. Dew clung to the newly polished bench at Quiet Honor Lane, the bronze plaque still catching the occasional touch of a passerby. Nearby, a folding easel displayed a black and white photo of a man no longer unknown. Below it, a simple arrangement of wildflowers rested on a folded American flag. Emily stood near the front step, her apron gone, replaced by a navy blue cardigan and a quiet confidence she hadn't worn 2 years ago. A soft breeze tugged at a lock of hair that had slipped from her bun. She nodded in greeting to each guest as they arrived. Some brought coffee, others brought silence. Kyle Travers, now in khakis, and a windbreaker embroidered with the SEAL trident, stood just behind her, with 6 young recruits at his side, straight-backed, clean-shaven eyes forward. None of them had known Harvey personally. All of them knew who he was. Emily stepped up first. "Thank you all for coming," she said, her voice low but steady. "Today isn't about uniforms or speeches. It's about remembering someone who walked with quiet purpose and never once asked for recognition." Kyle followed. His gaze scanned the small crowd. Retirees cafe, regulars, school teachers, and children in raincoats clutching paper drawings of a dagger crossed through a crest. "Some legends live in books," he began. "Others serve coffee and never brag." A soft ripple of knowing passed through the group. A few people nodded. One elderly man in a marine ball cap murmured, "Amen." Kyle gestured toward the covered table beside the bench. Emily stepped forward and gently pulled the cloth away, revealing a prosthetic leg resting on a velvet pad, sleek, polished titanium gleaming despite the rain. On its side, the engraved words, "For the one who walked so others could." Gasps weren't audible, but there was a visible shift in posture and reverence. A few hats came off. Children stepped closer, eyes wide. Nearby, a corkboard had been pinned with laminated letters written in crayon pencil marker. "Thank you for being brave even when no one saw you. fixed cars, and saved soldiers. I want to be quiet like you and still matter. Each one signed with shaky handwriting and big earnest hearts. At the final easel stood a small shrine. Harvey's photo in uniform, a framed napkin with faded handwriting, and beside it, a yellowed envelope. Emily placed a single folded letter beneath the glass, James's. The one that had started it all. Kyle took a breath, then turned to the recruits. Step forward, one by one they did. Each paused at the leg, placed a hand briefly over the crest. Not a full salute, just a moment, contact recognition. Then they moved on, heads bowed toward the bench. Emily stood beside table 9, now marked with a discreet bronze plaque of its own, reserved for the quiet ones. She lit a candle in a small glass holder and placed it beside a folded napkin. The breeze returned rustling branches and paper alike. The napkin fluttered once its edge lifting just enough to show the words penned beneath the fold. Silence when true speaks forever. In a quiet town where spring blooms gently, returned the empty chair at table 9 no longer spoke of neglect but of legacy. What began with sidelong glances and a faded tattoo ended with salutes, stories, and a community that finally paused to listen. Sometimes the greatest strength lies not in what's spoken but in what's endured, and kindness, when given freely and without expectation, echoes longer than applause, like the quiet hum of a morning diner. Those small acts often go unnoticed until someone chooses to see. If this story touched your heart, perhaps let it pass through your hands to someone still waiting for their quiet hero to be seen.